are we going to leave on the 31st of October?
Absolutely. I mean, the Prime Minister couldn't have been clearer, as you said in your introduction, all along, that this government wants to get Brexit done. We want to leave on the 31st of October, and we will be doing everything in our power to bring that about.
So if there isn't a deal agreed by the 19th of October, which, let's get real, is definitely a possibility, will the Prime Minister be writing a letter requesting an extension to Brexit?
Well, we've said that, as any government would do, we will comply with the law. However, all of our efforts now are focused on trying to get a deal. And we've just put forward some, I think, very reasonable and thoughtful proposals to the EU. They try to answer the questions that had dogged the previous deal prepared by Theresa May. They say that for the legitimate concerns of the Irish government, that we will create a new arrangement on the island of Ireland, which will enable goods to flow freely. There won't be any hard infrastructure at the border, and we will remove the backstop and replace it with something much more democratic, which is a consent mechanism so that the people of Northern Ireland can always have an ultimate say of where they want these arrangements to continue. I hope that the EU will now engage with these proposals and that we can leave the EU in a very orderly and amicable way on the 31st of October. But I don't think, with greatest respect, there's much point in speculating on what might happen should the EU fail to come forward and engage with our proposals.
OK, I know that you want this deal to get over the line, but just you have to bear with me for a minute, because if you just look at what the EU have been saying, we have to at least entertain the possibility that this is not going to happen. I mean, you know, they've called for fundamental changes. Leo Varadkar says they fall short in a number of aspects. Donald Tusk says the EU is not convinced. I mean, you can see why people are getting a bit twitchy here, so I'll just go back to my question. If a deal isn't agreed, will the Prime Minister pen that letter requesting an extension?
Well, the Prime Minister has been very clear that he is not going to extend Article 50. So I don't think he personally could have been any clearer. We have said that we will comply with the law. However, what we're going to do now is work as hard as we possibly can to secure that deal. And I know there are mixed messages coming out of the EU. There always are. This is a negotiation. You would expect there to be some noises off around the margins. However, the reaction to this deal has actually been surprisingly positive. If you look at the domestic reaction, you've seen support from the DUP,
yeah, but it's the EU
from Conservative members of Parliament.
That you need to sign it off before it comes back to that domestic.
The EU, one would hope, would like to come to the table and ensure that we can leave in an orderly fashion. Their criticisms in the past have been that we don't have a deal that's able to get through the House of Commons. I think the PM has been able to demonstrate that this deal has a good chance of doing that. It's not just Conservatives and DUP members. Actually, there's a number of Labour MPs who do respect the outcome of the referendum who've said that they're inclined to support this arrangement. We hope that the EU will now productively engage in a discussion and that these can be the basis of a way forward.
You see, I'm still trying to work out what is going to happen, because we're now in October. I mean, it's crunch time, right? And I have to say, I am really a little bit confused, because you're saying that no matter what happens, you're not going to extend, you're going to leave, deal or no deal, at the end of October. You're also saying, as you have consistently, that the government is going to comply with the law. But the law, according to the Benn Act, says that if there isn't a deal, then there must be an extension. I mean, I don't understand this. You're a clever man. Come on, what's going on here? These things don't make sense.
Well, let's work through what could happen in the coming days. We've published these proposals. I think, as I said, that they're good proposals, and they do finally point us to a way forwards. The EU now need to engage with those. I think it would be extremely disappointing if the EU chose to walk away and not engage with proposals where we've made compromise, and we know that there is a high degree of support here.
It's fair enough for people to work out what's going to happen in a couple of weeks' time if the EU doesn't agree. That's fair enough.
Well, if you want a good outcome, I don't think there's much to be gained in speculating on what we may or may not do, what tactics we might choose to deploy later on in the negotiation. But we have been clear that if we can't get a deal through the House of Commons, or if, which seems concerning at the moment, that the EU might not choose to engage with, I hope that's not the case, then this government has no intention of extending Article 50. We think the UK needs to move forwards. You've just seen at the Conservative Party conference the policies we've been putting forward for the future, like investing in the NHS and schools, in extra police officers, in my own area, in housing. The whole country really is crying out for us to get Brexit done and to move forwards. And that's what we're trying to do now. So there is a moment here where the EU need to match our compromise with a willingness to negotiate. And they would be quite wrong if they think that by rejecting these proposals, we would change tack, offer something materially different to what we're putting forward here. We've put forward something that does represent a very significant compromise. We want them to engage in turn.
Can you rule out asking any other EU country to veto an extension?
I've not heard any serious talk of that beyond the speculation that I've seen in the papers. So I think that's, with all due respect, just tittle-tattle.
Okay. So I just wonder, just listening to you, is the real truth that the government is prepared to extend, but you just need to show that you're dragged there kicking and screaming, that you don't want to do it, that it's those pesky Remainers who forced you into it so that you can go to the election and hopefully win a majority off the back of that? Is that the real truth here?
No. Well, you're right in one sense, which is that Boris Johnson and this government will do absolutely everything in our power to deliver Brexit on the 31st of October. But we have no plan as to what might happen if Parliament, doesn't allow us to get Brexit done on the 31st of October, because we intend to get it done on that date. And that's the sole focus of this government at the moment. We don't want to see this go on beyond that date. I don't think the country does either. People really want us now to get Brexit done. And I think there is a genuine opportunity now to do that if the EU can respond to the compromises that we've made and offer some in return. And if you look at the proposal that we've put forward, this is a very fair proposal.
Okay, I'm keen not to get into the details of the proposal because we've done so much on the kind of intricacies of the Brexit deals. Just very quickly, is the government visiting the Queen this weekend to try and ask for another prorogation of Parliament ahead of a potential Queen's speech?
I don't know the details of when the next Privy Council meeting is going to be held, but we've clearly set out our intention to prorogue Parliament in the usual way later this coming week to have a Queen's speech. And we're not taking any more days than is absolutely necessary to do that. The way that a Queen's speech happens, requires changes to the security arrangements in Parliament for the Queen and the royal household to make certain arrangements. And so we're simply proroguing for the minimum amount of time to enable that to happen.
Is it acceptable, though, to ask for a Queen's speech when you want an election? Because if you're going to have an election, there's going to be no time to implement the programme. You're effectively just using the monarch to read out a party political broadcast.
No, it's perfectly normal when you have a new Prime Minister, a new administration, for us to be able to set out our proposals and our legislative agenda in a Queen's speech. That's what always happens in these circumstances. You're right, we want a general election. We've been trying to get a general election now for some time, and absolutely without precedent, the Labour Party as the official opposition have been turning us down every occasion. But until such time as they come forward and agree to that election, to submit themselves to the democratic will of the people, Parliament needs to continue. This is the longest session of Parliament for hundreds of years, so it's perfectly reasonable now to have a Queen's speech and bring forward a new agenda.